In the wake of the #EndSARS protests in Lagos, the National Broadcasting Commission imposed a fine of 3 million naira each on 3 Nigerian television stations, including Arise News, for allegedly infringing on certain regulations governing the coverage of such events. That action by the broadcast regulator has been attracting a lot of public condemnation, and most of the reactions have called the sanctions a deliberate attempt by government to muzzle the fourth estate of the realm and deprive journalists thereby the ability to effectively perform their constitutionally guaranteed right to inform and educate the general public. As a way of providing a right of reply to the National Broadcasting Commission for a program aired on Arise News on this matter, we'll now be speaking with 2 gentlemen, but one of them is already with us in the studio, from the National Broadcasting Commission, the Acting Director General, Professor Armstrong Idachaba. And we're expecting that later, Director of Broadcast Monitoring, Dr. Tony Anigala, will join us too. But first, let us begin with Professor Armstrong Idachaba, Acting Director General, National Broadcasting Commission. Professor Idachaba, good morning, and thank you very much for joining us on Arise News, the morning show. Well, quickly, as I said in my introduction, this is about the NBC's right of reply. The NBC, after imposing that sanction on 3 television stations, including this station, has received a lot of attacks. Some groups have gone to court. We also had some guests on this program who criticized the National Broadcasting Commission. We'd like you to start by clarifying the basis for that sanction and, to explain how exactly the NBC arrived at that decision.
Thank you very much, Dr. Abati. Let me first of all begin by acknowledging that it's an honor for me to appear on this program to speak with seasoned journalists like you and your colleagues. And let me also thank Arise Television for granting NBC the right of reply. Obviously, this is also an ethical professional requirement. Every broadcaster is mandated to grant any party that so desires, consequent to any broadcast, a right of reply. And I wish to enjoin Nigerians to cash in on this existing opportunity that's provided by the Broadcasting Code to reach out to broadcasters who may have misrepresented them or misunderstood them to offer clarifications. And this is necessary because as we begin to see increasingly, many broadcasters have abdicated the ethical criteria for fairness and balance. These days we see a lot of programs that are run that are hugely one-sided. The other views are not taken into consideration and attempts are not made to corroborate. And it is a disturbing trend really in the broadcast industry. So we hope that we evolve the tradition, the culture, right, of getting the other side of the story. And like you said, arising from the action of the NBC, there's been a lot of public commentary. Strangely, none of these broadcasters made any effort to even speak with the regulator. And that is not good broadcast practice. To answer your direct question, why did we have to impose a sanction? We had to impose a sanction because we found out that in the coverage of the NSAS campaign, that many broadcasters began to be reckless in the coverage of the crisis. I must acknowledge that at the beginning of the crisis, there was fairness, there was reasonable professionalism. All shades to the issue were given opportunity to present their positions. The broadcasters followed the agitators, as they went on their protest, which at the initial stage was peaceful. When government responded, and preferred solutions and answers to the demands of the protesters, the broadcasters also gave the government view. But what we monitored was a dramatic turnaround the moment the protest became violent. And rather than come up with facts of the issues, we began to see deliberate distortions, right? Manipulated storylines, fake infusions and intrusions into the narrative, in graphic presentations that rather than help to reduce the situation, more or less aggravated. We saw spurious claims, misrepresentation of facts. And these are in clear violations of the provisions of the Broadcasting Code. We began to wonder at that time whether broadcasters had totally abdicated their ethical requirements. For points of clarity, Section 562 of the Broadcast Code is very clear. It says, the broadcaster shall approach with restraints the use of materials from user-generated sources. And that was the problem. User-generated sources. Broadcasters abdicated their own role of relying on their own reporters. Many of you had reporters at many of those locations, but the stories you churned out, the visuals that you churned out, emanated from other user-generated sources. And these sources were not corroborated, they were not authenticated, they were not verified, they were largely misleading. That, again, is in clear violations of the provisions of the Broadcasting Code. 565, for instance, says, the broadcaster shall ensure that news materials sent in by the public are vetted to ensure editorial responsibility. And editorial responsibility is critical. I followed Dr. Abati as a seasoned journalist. He writes very highly insightful articles, and I'm sure in the process of writing, he sits down to reanalyze the content that he puts on paper. He does some form of self-regulation in terms of editing and gatekeeping. And ideally, any broadcaster journalist whose word is salt ought to do what you call authentication and verification of sources. But what we saw was, as I said earlier, an abdication of this ethical requirement. And what was the impact? The impact was that we had exaggerated stories, we had misrepresentations, we had heightening psychological torture emanating, from some of the pictures and the stories that were coming out. And some stations, including yours, Arise, were offering positions that were contrary to even the official positions of government. Well, so where was the culture of veracity?
Well, Prof, I'm not trying to engage you in an argument, but since you mentioned Arise News, I want to just make this point. At Arise News had footages upon footages of reports, videos, live coverage from the protests across Lagos and across the country. But we used just a few. And we did a lot to verify, and we ensured editorial responsibility, which was one of the issues that you raised. But the NBC is talking about verification. Now, what exactly is the point about verifying those footages? Footages, most of which, almost all of which, were submitted, brought in by our own reporters who were right out there on the field.
Well, the facts available to us clearly indicated that the pictures, most of the pictures that were transmitted at the time of that conflict, those pictures depicting violence and the pictures that attempted to justify what several of you called mass killings, or massacre, were actually gotten from social media sources. Quite strangely, one of them or several of them gleefully on their station claimed that the source of information was a certain DJ. And the DJ had a reputation for uploading visuals. How much of those content did they subject to verification? If I'm to talk about Arise TV, I monitored a report that was written in Nation's newspaper, where it was actually established that there was a misrepresentation of a picture, of an image that was taken of someone who was on top of a roof repairing a bank building, and the interpretation that was given on the set, was that he was a sniper. And that led to a lot of other attacks and arson on public property. The point, Dr. Abati, basically, is that at times of national emergency and crisis, there must be extreme care and restraint. There must be extreme care and restraint. It is possible for people to upload pictures. Only yesterday night, I saw a video that I was studying of a BBC reporter who was on ground at the Lekki toll gate. And what did she say? She said she saw soldiers came. Apparently, they didn't shoot at the protesters. That what happened was that they probably shot into the air to scare the people, and that they asked them to sit down. The organizers asked the people to sit down, and they sat down. She was asked on BBC whether there were any direct shooting at anybody, and she said no, that she didn't see that. So how come this narrative is reestablished by Nigerian broadcasters often and often when they do not have visuals and any other thing to justify what they claim?
Well, Prof, sorry, I mean, this is not supposed to be...
And that is the point.
This is not supposed to be a back and forth. It's supposed to just be a conversation. But you referred to the issue about a report talking about a sniper on top of an Access Bank building. Now, within 5 minutes of that report, Arise News corrected it. We read a statement from the managing director of Access Bank saying, no, that building was not theirs. It was a building within the vicinity. And we corrected it repeatedly, up to about 3 times. That's why it's surprising that you included Arise.
Now, Ruben,
yes, Prof.
Dr. Abati, Abati, you are using my time to give yourself a right of reply.
Okay, I will restrain myself.
But in any case, Dr. Abati, the point you made is a critical point. You said within 5 minutes. Now, broadcasting is electronic. And that is the point. It comes with immediacy. And chances are that whoever picked a broadcast content at a point, is not there to monitor your retraction or your apology. And it goes with the impression that is already disseminated. That is why you cannot be too careful. We had a similar situation in Abuja when the AIT, around that time, went on air to announce that the economical center, in its news, that the economical center was on fire. Where did he pick the story from? Again, from social media. AIT did not authenticate, they did not verify, they tweeted it on a broadcast. It took the call of several people to ask them to go to the location, and when they went, they came back to issue a retraction and an apology. And that was news about a spiritual symbol in this country, an edifice that reflects the Christian religion. Imagine you had some militant, aggressive, uncontrollable Christians deciding to make reprisals. What would be the consequence? So we implore broadcasters. We understand that there's freedom of expression. The freedom of expression must be exercised with restraint. And if you allow me, I would like to make the point about those who think that for the NBC to regulate, that the NBC will be infringing in their liberties. Several of them are probably ignorant, including some lawyers, I beg to say, that the NBC is founded on the Constitution, and that the power of the NBC to regulate the broadcast industry has been tested in court severally since 2005, up to the appeal court. In one of the rulings, Dr. Abati, this will interest you, the Justice Stephen Ada said the right sought for freedom of expression by Ife Anyukagbu in 2006, writing on behalf of media rights advocate. He said the right sought is not absolute right. Broadcasting can be regulated. And he went further to say, the purpose basically is like filtering your drinking water before you drink it.
Yes, indeed.
That it is important. That when you drink water, you filter. Then the other analogy, hold on, let me finish. The other analogy he gave is that broadcasting is like running a high-tension electric current direct to the house without stopping down with a transformer. If you do that, what happens? You blow your house. You kill the occupants of the house. In the same way, You don't allow any broadcast content to hit the public space if you do not verify, authenticate, or self-regulate in a way that it creates the proper impact and becomes harmless to society. Right. So regulation basically is to protect society. And this ruling was tested, appealed to this appeal court, and Justice Bode Rhodes-Vevo upheld it and said the Nigerian Broadcast Code is not contrary to the Constitution. It is a valid subsidiary legislation to give full effect to the NBC Act 38 of 1992. Wow. So the NBC has a responsibility to ensure that broadcasters operate within the confines of the provisions of the Broadcasting Act and the Broadcasting Code.
Indeed, every
Go
industry...
ahead, my dear.
Thank you, Prof. Every industry must be regulated. I don't think that's going to be disputed at any point. But you made a reference, which I found quite amusing, to Dr. Abati's right of reply. And that leads me to the right of reply of Arise News and the other broadcasting stations that you find. Our Constitution also has the right of fair hearing in Section 36. Why were the broadcasters not called in by yourselves to answer the query before a fine was just arbitrarily imposed, it seems? Because you mentioned earlier that no broadcaster contacted you, the NBC. Should it not have been the NBC contacting us?
Great. I wonder how much opportunity you have to access correspondences with Arise TV. But let me tell you what we did as a responsible broadcasting regulatory agency. In August this year, based on the COVID pandemic, the NBC organized a workshop, an annual lecture that concentrated on the role of broadcasters in the coverage of national emergencies and crisis situations. I'm sure your station hooked onto the program, where professors, 4 university professors, experts in the industry, Eugenia Abu, Professor Chinyere Okuna, Professor Gambo of the University of Maiduguri, and a host of other experts, actually discussed the role of the media, how the broadcaster, should operate at the time of a national challenge and crisis. We invested a lot of money. When the EndSARS campaign began, I, on my own, out of intuition, I issued a press statement, which I distributed to all the broadcast stations, to request that broadcasters at this time must exercise restraint and caution. We put further phone calls to the broadcast stations when they began to abdicate their responsibility. We sent letters of caution, which was distributed to every broadcast station. I invited some of the broadcast stations to my office in Abuja, and we had a discussion where I appealed to them to be professional. How much engagement do you want the regulator to do? In spite of all of this, we were shocked that at the moment we expected high standards, Nigerian broadcasters rather disappointed the regulator.
Okay. I'd like to come in here and ask you this. You talked about videos that were gotten from sources online. I want to ask, what is NBC's, technology that they have as regards, the verification of those videos? Because most of those videos are contestable. They have been verified by, agencies around the world that their job is to verify videos based on the trend of fake news around the world, and they've seen some level of authenticity. So I want to know the technology the NBC have in place to verify the source of video, or is it just because those videos are contrarian, to the views of establishments? Is that why they are null and void? Because that's the argument a lot of people are having, with the NBCs. And I'm sure that's part of the argument you'll have seen in most of the cases filed in court, maybe from SERAP and some other organizations. What's your technological tool in verifying those videos? And how do you ascertain that it's coming out as fake? I just want to know that, sir.
Fine. Again, I think that Dr. Abati will have answered this directly to you. The onus is on the broadcaster to verify, to authenticate. It's not on the regulator. You are the one that owns the platform. You are the disseminator of information. The ethical mandate, the ethical burden is on you to ensure that before you churn out, you do your check.
But
and that is what happens across the world.
Professor,
even on the social media, even on the social media platform.
What I'm asking,
we are beginning. Okay, maybe you need to reframe.
Let me rephrase. What I'm asking is, yes, the NBC came out to say the videos were false because they were gotten from a social media platform, which might not conform with the editorial outplay of a media organization. Yes, that's your point. But for you to prove that, you must have verified. So what was your technology tool in proving that those videos aired were false? Because those other videos were verified by international reputable fact-checking agencies. And they looked out for various, sensitive materials, and they said, oh, it actually happened at this time detail. So what was your counter technology you used in saying these videos were false? I just want to know that, sir.
Again, the onus is on you to ensure that what you transmit is credible, is authenticated, it is believable. Now, regarding how we came about knowing that some of these things are fake, it's out there in the public. Some of the visuals you showed, not particularly your station, some of the visuals that were shown, the footages that came out, some of the people that they claimed died on the location came out to say they are alive and they didn't die.
The visuals we showed were verified.
There's the funny one.
Prof.
There's this. Let me land.
Okay.
Can I land?
Yes.
There's a particularly funny one that showed a Nigerian flag that was drained in blood, and that was shown around the country. It elicited a lot of agony and pain among Nigerians. And it turns out, much later, that visual was actually visual obtained from a rehearsal class of a theater arts department in a Nigerian university, years before now.
But that was online. Prof,
so you see
why I'm putting this rebuttal in? Prof, most of the videos, all the videos we used were verified, and they were verified by top international agencies that spot patterns of fake news, and they authenticated them. And that's why I'm just asking this question. I just want to know the technology with the NBC use, because the NBC will have come up with something.
Let me tell you something that may interest you.
Yes, sir.
At the point of the conflict, there was a time I monitored your station, and I think the entire set was on set, right? Brilliantly, you attempted to do some balancing. You were talking about the president's speech and the fact that he didn't make comments about what happened at Lekki. Then between you were not too sure whether to call it killings, or killing. I can see Ruben is raising his hand. And that was because you were not sure of the facts. So why, when there are incongruities, when there are inaccuracies and inconsistencies, you don't entrench the narrative. And that's one thing that is very disturbing. Many of the Nigerian broadcasters actually had reporters embedded in that location. I saw them. I saw some of them running to say, okay, now, as we are talking, the soldiers are here, this is what is happening. Oh, okay. And then they left. And the moment they left, they started bringing pictures that were gotten from other sources, claiming that those people were streaming. If those people had the safety to stream at the same location, why were our own professional broadcasters licensed by government unable to pick any of those visuals to corroborate the story they were offering?
Well, Prof, I'd like to go back to the point raised by Tundun, which is also the point that has been raised by NUJ, Guild of Editors, BON, and other stakeholders, which is that before the NBC took the decision to impose the sanctions, that perhaps maybe a certain process should have been followed. Maybe a query should have been issued. The relevant stations should have been given the opportunity to say, these are the videos that we have issues with. And then, what is your defense? And if the NBC is then not satisfied, the NBC can then say, well, we don't, accept your explanations. This is the position we have taken. That was why I guess she was quoting Section 36. Because if a man has committed an offense, the offense should be explained to that person in a language that he or she understands and must be given the opportunity to defend himself. And then the regulator can then say, no, your explanation is not satisfactory. Hence, certain interested parties have raised the question about fair hearing. But I would like to go beyond that and ask you, we'll need to know, because you know the National Broadcasting Code, the amended one, the revised one, was quite controversial. At a point in August, early August, you were even quoted as saying that, look, it was the minister that took the decision, the board was not carried along. Well, 2 weeks later, you were also quoted as saying, oh, you were defending it. But your point of defense was quite different from what you had said earlier, which had to do with the overall temperament of that code. So which particular code are we talking about now? The old one or the controversial one that originally, you know, many stakeholders opposed?
Thank you, Dr. Abati. I don't know you to be mischievous, but thank you again that you raised this. One, you said I was quoted one and I was requoted. I have never, and I told you, I have never said that the minister imposed the broadcasting code. I think it was the board, a certain member of the board, that said so. I was the one that came out to say the code was produced in conformity with the power of the NBC to fashion a broadcasting code for the industry. And I said the NBC acted within the realms of its power. Now, the code is traditional. The NBC produces the code. The NBC has the right to review the code. And in doing so, we do industry stakeholder engagement, which we did in this instance. So, and there's no controversy about the code. The code is in place, and we are applying the code, all the full positions of the code. Now, fair hearing. I like your logic about fair hearing. But here is it. The broadcasting code is an operational manual. The expectation is that any broadcaster, what is onions, should get acquainted with the provisions of the code. You don't start learning procedure in the middle of a game. So what it means, when broadcasters say which position of the code was violated, it means they are damn right ignorant or illiterate about their own working document. In spite of that, let me make the clarity, and I said so earlier, that the NBC engaged the industry. We wrote letters of caution. We issued press releases. There was dialogue in the office. Those are steps to engagement. Further to that, perhaps it is also important to expatiate on the gravity of breaches. When a broadcaster indulges in transmitting a broadcast content that is likely to bring to breakdown of law and order, the broadcast regulator has the instant responsibility to shut down that station. And it's not peculiar to Nigeria. Even in the American Constitution with the First Amendment, with all the freedom of expression entrenched in it, content, broadcast, speech that is likely to lead to breakdown of law and order is exempted. So if you follow the full application of the broadcasting code and the act, once we had established that content emanating were careless and reckless and dangerously leading to the collapse of the country, we had the responsibility to shut down. But we engaged, we consulted, and we took the option of a fine. But let me also warn that that should not be taken for granted. If any broadcaster mischievously, deliberately decides to abdicate their responsibility in a manner that are intended to create grievous consequences on the harmony and unity and the cohesion, stability of this country, the regulator will not be left with any other option than to ensure a closure.
Well,
so,
then,
Dr. Abati, if, for instance, the television stations took an advert of alcohol at 11 p.m., maybe at 11 a.m., instead of waiting till 10 p.m. for television or 8 for radio, of course, we can give you a slap on the wrist and say, okay, what happened? You are not supposed to take this advert at this time. Then you can say, oh, you are sorry, we did some wrong scheduling, and then we'll say, okay, next time you don't do that. If you do it again, we'll fine you. But not when you went to bring down the roof, you want to collapse the country, and you want to take the liberty of saying, okay, well done, where did you get this? How did you do that? By the time you are going through all of that, there will be no broadcast station, there will be no Nigeria for continued dialogue. So we want broadcasters themselves to weigh the gravity of their misconduct. Of course, we engage, we discuss, but some matters are very serious that reprimand must follow, and in the instant, if not for anything, to serve as a deterrent.
Well, first of all, I want to say sorry because I keep interrupting you, but you know better than anybody else, we don't like dead air in broadcasting. When you pause, I assume that you finished. But I want to know, what is the role of a broadcaster in 2020? Because thank God we're no longer in 1984. I refer you to the code, NBC code, that broadcasters ought to be mindful of material that may embarrass individuals or organizations or cause disaffection, incite panic and rift in the society in the use of user-generated content, which is valid until you look at the provisions of Section 22 of the Constitution, whereby the press is free to uphold the fundamental objectives of Chapter 2 of the Constitution and uphold the responsibility and accountability of the government to the people. Now, it is trite that any law in Nigeria is null and void to the extent that it violates the Constitution. So I want you to go over the actual role today in a democracy of broadcasters, because the UGC in contention at the moment, and I'm glad that you credited Arise. We never bought into the social media bandwagon of calling the Lekki incident a massacre. I'm glad that you mentioned that. We were nuanced, we were careful. But the fact is that an incident did occur. We never said that protesters were shot at. But even the army admits that soldiers were deployed there. Even the governor of Lagos tweeted about it, referring to forces beyond his control. The governor of Lagos went to visit people who were injured in that incident in various hospitals. He tweeted about it. There were people in General Hospital, Reddington Hospital, and Vedic Hospital. So this was not a figment of anybody's imagination. What exactly is the role? Because the line appears to be rather blurred.
Thank you. And let me, before I forget, acknowledge your beauty and hard work.
Oh, you're very kind, sir. Thank you.
But
Prof,
thank you.
even in the course of this conversation, you are toasting on television.
Okay, doctor. No, it's a compliment, Dr. Abati. It's a compliment. Okay. I mean, you are also looking good. You are a cool dude.
Thank you.
All right, but let me speak directly. Let me speak directly to the issue. Really, yeah, you asked a very relevant question. What should be the role of the broadcaster in 2020? And here is the challenge. Technology is fast evolving. There's a lot of rapid dynamization in terms of interactiveness, brought by digital technology. Speed is enhanced. Availability of information is at the maximal. And that also comes with the capacity for mischief. Photoshop, it superimposed sound bites. And all of this calls for vigilance. And that is why even the section you read of the broadcasting code says the broadcaster shall approach with restraint. Underline the word restraint. It means you have to exercise extreme caution. The game now is deception. And that is where I believe that the future hope for credible journalism and broadcasting remains with the traditional media. Because the traditional media is founded on an ethical foundation. The ethics are there. Accuracy, you are taught from basic journalism school. Corroborate your facts. In fact, you are taught in school, if you are not sure, leave out. But that is not the case with user-generated content. Everybody has now become a journalist. And this is the danger. Broadcasters increasingly are beginning to become victims of the social media. Traditional broadcasters, I mean. They are beginning to be drawn into the nuances and the lack of professionalism of user-generated journalists. So, if you are not careful, you gradually commit professional suicide because you will undermine your own professional etiquettes and the value will go. As I speak, the social media is beginning to undo itself because if any news breaks on the social media these days, nobody really takes it seriously. What they do is to wait to listen to Arise, TV news, wait for channels, NTA, to confirm the veracity. So the trust and credibility is currently with the traditional media, and that is why we want you to guard it jealously. If you lose your credibility and integrity, then where is then the future of broadcasting and journalism? And any way you look at it, for now, the future, broadcast content will continue to be a major driver and a major driver of human engagement.
Okay.
Broadcasting, broadcast content shapes the perception, the psychology of people in any society.
Okay, Professor.
It is more than any other national value, a most valuable phenomenon.
Okay, Professor. And you've said it rightly. Yeah, we need to guard this jealously. You've also acknowledged the fact that technology has come into it. I mean, you made mention of various Photoshops. That's not even the big deal. What I fear the most, Professor, is deep fakes. How you can superimpose voice on pictures and how you can manipulate on all of that. Deep fakes is even going to revolutionize the world. And that's why I insisted, because just for the records, all the videos we use here at Arise TV were verified by Arise TV, using our technology on ground to be able to verify this. That's why I keep saying, what is the NBC doing to be able to bridge the gap of this technology? And secondly, I want to talk to you about your monitoring system. What's the monitoring mechanism like? Prof, I put it to you. Is it only Arise TV and those stations find that use those that they use those materials that you deem were not verified? Is it only Arise? Are there no other stations across board? I just want to ask that.
Thank you very much. By the way, I have not complimented you. You're also looking very cool and handsome.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Now, now I get the drift regarding the point we're making about the capacity to check and verify. I'm glad you have said at Arise Television, you conduct your own search. You do authentication and verification. And perhaps after this, I'll book an appointment with the chairman, come and see what you have and recommend it to other broadcast stations. It is very important that broadcasters equip themselves with the right capacity for verification. So I commend Arise TV for having that facility. But beyond that, there must also be due diligence. Yesterday I appeared on a program, and a journalist on the program, the anchor, said that broadcasters were under pressure for immediacy of reportage. And I more or less told her that speed kills. If you, because of speed of news delivery, break news without verification, the consequences are also electrifying. They are spontaneous. So it is very important that, as we said consistently, that there must be restrain, restrain, restrain. On the other question, whether it is only Arise TV and channels and AIT that flouted the provisions of the broadcasting code, what I can assure you is that the NBC consistently monitors and we apply sanctions across board. For stations, we have established infractions. Definitely, sanctions will be imposed.
Well, Prof, I like the point you made that you like to pay a courtesy visit to Arise News. I'm not too sure that we have any objection to that, but
no,
I doubt if inspection is part of the original functions of the NBC, because if you have to go and be inspecting stations,
it's in
terms of what they have.
It's in our act that we can go to any station anytime.
Anyway, but let me ask you, what will make the NBC happy? The NBC does not want the broadcast of riots and protests. Is that the issue? And secondly, with the furore that all of this has generated, is the NBC thinking of, okay, letting this pass because you have been accused of being a judge in your own cause and stakeholders have protested? I guess the matter can be resolved. You've made your point about responsibility and all of that. Is the NBC thinking of, okay, let this go and we move on, instead of spending all the time in court?
I wish it were as easy as it were as easy as that, Dr. Abati. But let me tell you that stations that have been fined have already responded. Some of them have actually paid their fines. Those who have not paid their fines are in further breach of the provisions of the law, because what the law clearly says is that when you are sanctioned and you do not respond within time, the regulator has the right to upgrade the sanction. And it is not a pleasing option. I hope that the regulator doesn't get there. So the matter was only resolved when stations pay the fine. But beyond paying a fine, I'll be more gratified if we have a robust, free broadcast environment. One that the operator, the broadcaster, exercises his liberty, editorial liberty of program scheduling, program dissemination, of the intellectual, engaging, insightful dialogue that several broadcast channels are offering. We get worried when at times that we expect the broadcaster to up his game, he becomes lackadaisical, he becomes careless, or becomes reckless, or becomes drawn into the conflict in a manner that the broadcaster now becomes the aggravator and becomes the reason, the stimulant for destruction in society. That remains always, always very condemnable.
Well, looking to the future now, Prof, specifically to 2023, how can NBC create or encourage an environment of that robust freedom that you just referred to, holding the government accountable? Because earlier you made a reference to offering the government's position, but it's also the duty of a broadcaster to offer the voices of dissent. So how is the NBC going to create this environment?
We've created that environment already. On your program, on the morning show, diverse opinion is pluralism at its peak. The NBC has never censored any broadcast station. I'm sure up to today, none of you had ever seen me. You probably don't know what I look like. You probably have not read any memo from the NBC because we are operating, within the rules. We don't interfere in the process, right? We want a robust, free broadcast environment in Nigeria, and we are proud that between 1992, when the industry was deregulated, and now, Nigeria perhaps is the biggest, most robust broadcast industry in Africa. We have 600 broadcast stations, most of them private, several others state-owned, federal government-owned, and even community broadcast stations. So we have liberalized the broadcast environment. We have allowed broadcasters to editorialize. We have allowed freedom of expression as much as we can. But like as I read to you, when the abuse of freedom becomes detrimental to societal harmony, then the regulator has a responsibility.
But how can we as broadcasters avoid these landmines, which clearly exist, hence this 3 million naira fine that you slammed on us? In the approach to 2023, there's going to be all kinds of political debates. It's not going to be all about the government's position. The opposition, too, will need to be heard, right?
Broadcasting code.
So read the broadcast code.
Okay.
Digest the broadcast code. Imbue it, and you will not run into any trouble.
Okay. I want to say strongly here, and I want to know the future as regards broadcasting in Nigeria, coverage, the use of technology, because if you watch the American elections recently, news channels could use exit polls to call elections. I know if you do that in Nigeria, NBC will be the first to call us and sanction us, that the country will be on fire. When are we going to get to that level of technological advancement in Nigeria, when is it that our media networks too are going to be able to play critical roles in electioneering? The future.
Why don't you use examples that are more classical, that are better referrals? CNN, renowned world news channel, covered the American election. At no point did it on its own conjure any results. Up till date, what they put on their screen is what is officially released by the electoral empire in each of the states. I'm sure some of you in Nigeria by now, you will have gone to take a press conference somewhere, somehow, or posted your own results, you know, based on what you think are the projections. The broadcasting code is clear. You are free to announce results only as released by the electoral empire. And we see it in Nigeria. During elections, many of you send your reporters to the location, and you're at INEC office at the state level, right, at the local government level. And the declaration of a winner only comes when INEC officially says, this is the man that has won the election. It's standard procedure. It's also in the INEC manual. So the tradition is the same. I don't see what is different, really.
Well, Prof, thank you very much for joining us. It's been a very engaging time with you on the morning show. Thank you very much indeed.